The team spirit, I've never seen anything like this. Our flight crews would go on a COVID-19 transport for 2 hours with the sickest of patients. They would go back, decon, get medicine, and then they would ask us, who needs us next? Where can we go next? How can we help next? For everyone in the world at this point, COVID has certainly changed the way that we work, the way that we live. Particular to Air Methods, I had the unique opportunity that when the surge occurred in New York City, we were getting requests of anywhere between 5 and 10 patient transports a day. When the helicopters landed at JFK Airport and the crews went over, there were so many patients, and the staff was doing everything they could to take care of the patients, that they didn't leave many people left to help coordinate moving these patients. So I had the opportunity to actually go into the hospital, work side by side with the nurses and doctors to help figure out who needs to go, and then assign them to an aircraft and assign them to a flight crew. And I can only tell you, it was an extraordinary experience in the sense of to see the heroics that was occurring from the nurses, the doctors, and these patients were the sickest I've ever seen in the last 8 years, true critical care patients. So that was my first experience with COVID, 13 hours overnight in a New York City hospital. That night alone, we transported about 6 patients out, 5 by helicopter and 1 by plane.
As much as we're going into the metropolitan area, it was nothing normal because it's not like you were landing on a ground helipad at the hospital or a rooftop helipad. It was almost like transferring from a rural community hospital without a helipad. We had to go to the airport and crews had to go by ground, which took a lot of coordination because of the limited resources that were available, and still trying to move things along rapidly and get that patient from New York City to upstate New York.
When you really walk into these ICUs, it's almost like field medicine in a military situation. There are just, sick patients everywhere. Most of them, if not all of them, were on ventilators. They had multiple drips of drugs going into their body. They typically were extremely unstable. So the benefit of transporting these sick patients by helicopter was, by ground, there's not too many critical care opportunities on the ground with critical care paramedics and nurses. But then also it reduced the out of hospital time, meaning the second that they got JFK and flew, it was less than an hour to most of the facilities they were going to versus a 2.5 to 3 hour drive. And then the ambulance was also out of rotation for the 3 hours on the way back. So saved an essential amount of time, and it brought critical care to the bedside.
Primarily, we went with the EC-135 and EC-145 as our first aircraft, first due in, because of the confines of the compartment and so forth, and the pilot's proximity to the patient. The majority of the aircraft were all single pilot VFR. Probably the unique challenge that the crews were faced with was the fact that they had multiple sets of gloves on, big bulky Tyvek suits, an N95 mask, a surgical mask, a face shield. So adding the complexity of the personal protective equipment only increased the workload, the stress level, and the difficulties that one would be faced with in a normal environment was just elevated slightly.
The personal protective equipment, the PPE, it's something that we use only a few times per year, and we're usually notified for the patient ahead of time. And all you could see is literally their eyes. Everything else was covered. So we had to get unique too with, we'd actually take magic markers and write on our suits our names.
The interesting part is, as we were sending teams into these hospitals that were completely overwhelmed, they were thanking the crews for coming to help them and could not believe that people were coming to assist them during these times. Be it unique in emergency medicine, critical care medicine, virtual hugs, eye contact, saying I love you, many things which, unless you actually are involved in something like this, it's difficult sometimes to fathom, but it impacted people on a personal perspective, and it still impacts them. to this day.
There's two people that stand out to me. There's one woman who's asked me, when I go home, how do I tell people what I've seen? And do I tell that to my loved ones? And you could tell she starts crying because, again, all you could see is her eyes, and you could see the tears falling. And I explained to her, what I do on a personal level. And she said, I don't know how to tell my husband and kids what I've seen, the sadness, the death. And I said, but also tell the stories of what you're seeing today. Like these flight crews who are flying in from, hundreds of miles away to come and help a stranger and be able to give them their last chance potentially of surviving. So to have that conversation with that person, then going outside, I was awaiting one of the ambulances with the flight crew, and a paramedic came outside, and you could tell he was a little emotional. And I said, do you need anything? He goes, do you mind just walking with me? So we took a walk down the road, and he was there for 9/11, and he has seen a lot. And he just kept saying, 9/11, it was a singular event. We knew it was over. We knew how hard it was. It was horrific. But then it immediately started the recovery of, my emotions and how we practice. He said, but this, I just don't know when the end is. And it was creating such anxiety and stress on him that all he could do was cry and kind of ask for help.
Amazing work by all, teamwork, knowing that each one of us can pick the phone up, strike the key on a computer, and know that parts are moving, whether they're domestic or international, to keep the aircraft in service, and to know that support is only a phone call away from many, many people in the midst of this crisis, so that we all have a positive outcome, and to, as I say, hopefully takes the worst day of someone's life and give them just one more opportunity for a better tomorrow. Kudos to everyone that was involved, from every discipline, to the aviation maintenance technician, to your regional VPs, your senior VPs, to communications, and of course the line staff, for just the positive attitudes and the heart to just go in and again try to make a difference. And again, thank you to everyone.